Talking about three essential changes that you need to make to level up from your K award to an R01 level grant. And the reason that I want to talk about this today is that this is something that comes up a lot when I'm talking with prospective clients who are interested in the K to R program that I run for women faculty. So if you're new to me, let me quickly introduce myself. I am Sarah Dobson. I am a research grant consultant, and I work primarily with early career researchers who are applying to NIH. And so I want to talk about this today because I know that this leap that you're making from a mentored K award to R01 level funding can be really daunting and kind of mysterious. And so it's helpful to just talk about some of the big picture changes in mostly in the way that you think, what those changes actually are, and how they can help you successfully make that leap to R1 level funding. So, when I'm talking about these changes, I'm not just talking about getting funded, getting that first R1. I'm talking about career-wide changes, right? Things that are going to help you have a successful and fulfilling career from here on out. Because that's, I'm not just interested in that short-term funding piece for you. I'm interested in you building a career that you're actually really proud of, and you feel that you're really making the impact that you want to make with your research, and that you're enjoying yourself. You're letting your passion and your curiosity lead the way. So that's what we're after. That's what we're talking about today. The three changes that you need to make to really level up. Okay, so let's talk about the first change, which is changing how you think about yourself. Okay, and I know that might seem like a strange place to start, but I promise you it's relevant to making this leap to the next stage of your career. And the reason is, when you are a mentee, when you have been making your way through this mentored career development award, and even prior to that, you're really in training mode, right? You are seeking the guidance and advice of mentors to help you build your career, right? Which is exactly what you're supposed to be doing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you are thinking about the next stage, you need to start putting yourself in the shoes of a PI and a leader. And that is really going to ask you to change the way that you view yourself, change your self-concept, right? And so some of the sort of hallmarks of mentee thinking are, again, sort of looking outside yourself for the answers and for guidance and for that stamp of approval that you're doing things right. That is, really common and totally normal, and absolutely to be expected at the mentee level. But when you are moving to independence and becoming an independent researcher, you really need to start thinking more independently, right? So you need to start trusting your own expertise and experience, and seeking outside information to help you make decisions rather than seeking answers from outside yourself, right? So it's a subtle shift, but it's a really, really, really important one, to make sure that you are not looking for answers outside yourself, but that you're gathering information that you can filter through your own expertise and experience to make decisions. Okay, so that is the first shift in the way that you think about yourself. The next shift that we're going to talk about is changing how you think about strategy. And this is another really common one that that honestly is a bit of a red flag for me. And so this is a really important one to consider. So a lot of questions that I get are some version of, what's the easiest way for me to get funding? And it's kind of disguised as a strategy question, right? It's like, well, should I go for this funding mechanism first? Or, I've heard that this study section is really tough, or that the pay line at this institute is much higher. So I'm going to try to fit my project so that I have an easier time getting funded. And so the strategy is around, how to improve my chances, how to sort of game the system so that I can get funded. And that is, again, totally normal, totally to be expected, especially in this funding landscape that is extremely challenging, extremely competitive, right? It's normal to try to figure out where you can gain an advantage, okay? But the way that I want you to start thinking about strategy is more from, what does my program of research need? Where do I need to go next? So instead of looking for how can I gain an advantage, you are crystal clear on where you're headed, right? You know exactly what your program of research is, the type of impact that you want to make, the big scientific challenge that you want to be working on, right? That is crystal clear to you, and you're on a mission. And you are sort of gathering resources and using what is available to you to help you achieve that, rather than, like I said, trying to figure out how you can gain an advantage. You have a clear purpose, you have a clear direction, and you are figuring out how to leverage what is around you to get you where you want to go. So again, it appears to be very subtle, but the change that you're making is really profound. And personally, I think it leads to a lot more career satisfaction, a lot more fulfillment, and a lot less chaos and overwhelm, right? You are laser focused on where you are headed, and you are making the resources work for you instead of the other way around. Okay, so that is the second shift, is to change how you're thinking about strategy. The third shift, or the third change that I want you to make, is in how you think about grant writing. So this, again, another super common one, which is exactly why we're talking about this today. And this is a common one because of the, let's say, the structural implications. Right? This is what happens when you start a faculty position and you see how others around you are responding to implicit and explicit expectations around productivity, right? Which usually means that you are churning out grants every cycle. You are going through this write, burnout, recover cycle, and you're really not focused on that sense of direction that we just talked about, right? It's just about trying to keep up, trying to show that you are putting in the work and that you are trying, right? And again, of course, totally normal, totally to be expected, but this is one of those really dangerous structural challenges around how we actually write grants and get our projects funded. This is a really sort of do or die, throw everything at it, churn out grants until something hits kind of attitude, right? Which is reinforced by the institution, by the environment you work in, right? But that just ends up making it harder, in my opinion, right? The way that you need to change how you think about grant writing is to focus on quality over quantity. And again, really focus on that sense of direction that you have established for your career, and that focus on where you're headed and the impact that you want to make. And if you can focus on quality over quantity there, the time that it takes you to actually get that first grant funded is going to be much shorter than if you're just churning things out and not really paying attention to the deep work and the connecting the dots that is required to write a really high quality application, right? So when you are focused on that quality over quantity, you are really taking the time that is required to do the deep thinking that your project deserves, right? And that will allow you to explain clearly and persuasively to your reviewers why your research ought to be done, why you have the right team in place to do it, and why your project is feasible. And if you are in that sort of right burnout recover cycle, you don't have the time and the capacity to really connect those dots for your reviewers and really explain clearly and persuasively what you're trying to accomplish and why it needs to be done, right? So changing the way that you think about grant writing from this sort of desperate, stressful, need to churn things out all the time. If you can move away from that and get more into I know where I'm headed. I'm going to give this the time and space that it deserves. And I'm going to write a really excellent, really compelling, really interesting and exciting application. That is ultimately going to get you where you want to go a lot faster than doing this sort of scattershot approach and just crossing your fingers, right? So those are the pieces that you really need to have in place. And just one more point on that last one in terms of changing the way that you think about grant writing. The other way that you need to change the way that you think about grant writing is around that first R01, okay? So the goal with your first R01 should not be to get it funded, to get a fundable score. That is putting way, way, way too much pressure on yourself. So the way that you need to change how you think about grant writing from that perspective, from that first R01, is I want you to think about it in terms of your objective being to get really good feedback from the peer review process. That's your main goal. And the way that you get really good feedback is by writing an application that is as free from grantsmanship errors as possible. And the reason that you want to have a grant that is as free of grantsmanship errors as possible is because that allows your reviewers to actually focus on the scientific merit of your application, which is their entire job, right? That's what they're there for. That's what they're doing, is assessing the scientific merit. But if your grant is full of if it's disorganized, if it's missing a lot of information, if it's confusing, that is just going to be distracting for your reviewers, and they're not going to be able to fully assess the scientific merit, and it's going to be frustrating for them. And so that's what you really want to avoid, right? And it's a lot easier to avoid that, again, if you give yourself the time and space that is required to write a really high quality application. You're much more likely to end up with tons of grantsmanship errors if you're just churning things out and really doing that sort of right burnout recover cycle that we've talked about, right? So that's a really important component of changing the way that you think about grant writing, especially for that first application. So get really good feedback from the peer review process and use that to make changes and refinements for the next time around, right? And if we go back to that first point about gathering information that you use to make decisions, that's exactly what you're doing with the feedback from the peer review process, right? So instead of letting that feedback be devastating and be some sort of referendum on your ability as a scientist, it's really just information, right? It's really something that you can use to agree with or disagree with and make changes for next time, or better justify why you're doing things the way that you're doing them. Okay, so to recap, the 3 changes that you need to make if you want to level up from your Career Development Award to R01 funding. The first one is change how you think about yourself. Change from a mentee to an independent researcher and a principal investigator, right? Change number 2 is change how you think about strategy. Instead of thinking about what's the easiest way for me to get this project funded, how can I sort of gain an advantage, you want to be thinking about what does my program of research require and how can I get that, okay? The third change that you need to make is around how you think about grant writing. So moving away from this write, burnout, recover sort of binge writing cycle into a quality over quantity, very focused, very in-depth approach to grant writing. And then when it comes specifically to that first R01, you're changing how you think about grant writing in the sense that you are not trying to get this first R01 that you've ever written. You're not trying to get it funded. You're trying to get really good feedback so that you can improve for next time. Okay, so that's it for today. If you found this helpful, I want to remind you that at the time of this recording, enrollment is open for the July cohort of the Impact Incubator, which is our K to R program for women faculty. So if you could use some support as you make that leap from your K award to R01 funding, I invite you to take our K to R readiness assessment. And you can find a link for that in the video description. And what that assessment is going to do is walk you through the 9 components that are required to make that transition from your career development award to R01 funding in a sustainable way, and obviously in a successful way, right? So if you take that assessment, you'll be able to identify the areas that you need to work on specifically, that you can focus your efforts and really help you get where you need to go. And so once you've done that assessment, you can book a call with me and we can talk about what you discovered in your K to R readiness assessment and talk about the kind of support that you might need to help you get to that next level. So again, you can find the link for that in the video description, and I look forward to chatting with you on a call. All right, take care.